The next step is to identify the target that you're creating a sales message for. And I just want to point out, we're going to dig pretty deep into the subject of targeting your sales message to different people. This, for your first sales message, this can be a very simple step, and you might even skip this whole step altogether, because if you're creating your first sales message, it might be a very broad message that you're targeting towards everybody. For example, your target could be businesses or small businesses or retirees or individuals. So I'm going to talk to you more about how having very focused sales messages. But when you're just getting going, you can just use a broad target and actually skip this chapter and skip this step. The logic here is either you can use some of this targeting with your first sales message, or just listen to it right now and then come back to this for your next message or two. So the logic here is to create a buyer persona focused sales message. And what that means is, see, when you have a product selling message, all you're doing is talking about the product that you sell in the company you work for primarily. And with that, you can use the same message for different buyers, right? It doesn't really matter the industry you're talking to, because primarily you're just talking about your product. So you can kind of say the same thing. When you have a consultative selling sales message that focuses more on benefits and problems and asking good questions, all those individual points and things you should say could change when you change the buyer type and the target buyer that you're going after. And you'll see that as we start to move forward in this process. But basically, what we can do is, when we select a very specific target buyer for the sales message that we're creating, we can create a message that's targeted to that particular individual. And this allows us to tailor the message to their interests and to their problems and the questions that make most sense to them. And this is where you literally start speaking the buyer's language. If you've ever had some sales managers tell you to speak the customer's language and you'll be able to sell more, that makes sense, but it's often difficult to do. This is how it can be easy to do that, because when you start to create a sales message, not only that's focused on their interests and their hot buttons, but also you can incorporate industry acronyms or industry events or industry related language. And like I said, you actually begin speaking their language. This could be the difference that sets you apart from the competition when you're making cold calls or sending emails, and could be the difference between you getting shot down or getting ignored and you getting your foot into that account. Now, the first step in maybe creating buyer persona targeted sales messages is to think about what target buyers are you going after and are you coming in contact with. And in order to do that, I recommend a step of brainstorming some of the buyer types that you should start to think about. So I'm going to go through some categories here. You don't need to memorize these or write all this down, but this is to give you some ideas of different target buyer types that you could go after. So like I said, for your first sales message, you might want to just use very broad buyer types that you can kind of use and create a very broad message that you can use for everybody. And that way you can start adopting the system with one message and keeping it kind of simple right out of the gate. So you could use just sort of businesses, small businesses, business owners, executives for your target buyer type. You might want to think about the different size of organizations that you're going after. Are you going after very large corporations or small businesses? You could sell the exact same product to large corporations and small businesses, but when you change that buyer type, your message might change. What you say to a small business owner could be very different from what you say to a large corporation or maybe a procurement department of a large corporation. You might want to think about the different industries that you sell into: construction, retail, healthcare, education. When you're calling and prospecting into organizations, you likely could sell into different departments. Sure, you could use the same message and probably get by and be successful, but you can reach a higher level of performance by having a different sales message when talking to those different audiences. You might want to think about the different titles of people that you're trying to reach in terms of the different levels of the organization. Are you calling into the C-level, VP level, manager level, director? Typically, when you move up the organization, the interests slightly change. The prospect becomes more big picture focused, less technical. When you're talking lower in an organization, you can focus more on the technical details. with that, you might end up benefiting from having a different message when talking to those different people. This one's a little bonus or a little extra step, but you could also have a different sales message for different sales stage prospects. For example, when you're talking to cold prospects that you haven't engaged with at all versus talking to past customers or even current customers that you're trying to cross-sell, those could be totally different messages, different emails, different call scripts, and you might benefit from thinking about who are the different people that you're going after and preparing for those. That might be overwhelming, and like I said, don't worry about that too much. That's just to kind of get your thoughts going. But for your planning long term, you can use any brainstorming you do on the different departments, different industries that you might go after, make those notes, and then you can create a tool that I call your campaign coordinates. And you end up with a tool that looks like this. Now, the column going up and down vertically on the left side, that's your brainstorming that you did with the different things that you sell. And this is where your notes come into play here from the previous chapter. Then across the x-axis, across the header row across the top, are the different buyer types that you want to go after. And this creates a matrix. It's similar to longitude, latitude lines on a map, where there's intersections between the products you sell and the different people that you're going after, the different audiences that you're going after. Where those intersect, that could be a sales message that you could create or a campaign that you could create. And if you look at this, just from the brainstorming I've done right here, there's a lot of different combinations. You by no means would want to create all of those. You want to look for, okay, what do I need to just hit the ground running? So that might be the sort of the everything product, maybe targeting businesses or small businesses. And then you just create that as your first message and maybe put a check mark in that intersection. And so this would be your a planning tool to create your sales strategy around and your sales messaging campaigns that you want to create over a period of time. Now, just to give you an anecdote of how this could help you, we can go back to the concept of coordinates and longitude, latitude, because think if you and I were to take a road trip and we wanted to drive across the country or the state and see some really interesting things. Well, if we just get in our car and try to drive and see what comes along our way, then we decrease our odds of our goal of successfully seeing some different interesting sites. But if we plan out the coordinates and the destinations of the different things we want to see, we greatly increase our odds of hitting our goal of seeing interesting stuff. Well, it's kind of the same thing with your sales strategy, in that your goal is to sell certain products and to hit your targets and to increase your revenue. And if you just have that very broad goal and you just go out and you try to talk to every prospect that you can come in contact with and talk about whatever product it seems to make sense talking about at that particular time, that's the equivalent of just driving around hoping to see some interesting stuff, which you may have some success, but your odds of success are lower than they would be if you had a plan. And so this is where you can start to build your plan for your sales strategy of what you want to sell and who you want to go after. And just in the same way that plotting out your coordinates on a map can increase your chances of having a successful road trip, this can increase your chances of having a successful sales strategy. Now, there's a very good chance that you just heard all of that and it might be overwhelming, especially with all of this being new to you. And my advice to you is, we definitely believe in a crawl, walk, run approach. And so don't let that overwhelm you. Our hope would be that you just did some brainstorming and at least made some notes and have some juices flowing in your head. But you don't really need to take all of that action and build all of that right now, because the crawl step is just to build one sales message. And like I said, in most situations, this would be a broad message that probably is for all of your products and targeting a large segment of the market, such as businesses, and create a broad sales message and just use that. Once you're ready to go from crawling to walking, you can come back to this process and come back to your brainstorming, and you can create additional sales messages that you could start to use and add in once you've sort of begun to adopt this smart sales system. The additional messages that you might want to create for your walk phase might be individual sales messages for different products that you sell. And once you're ready to go to the next level and you're ready to run, you could come back to this process, and this is where you might create different sales messages for the different types of buyers. So this is where you might want to create a finance department sales message or a manufacturing industry sales message.